Today I have a polarizing video, which is 4,000 and 8,000 hertz polling a scam? Is it a gimmick? Is it actually real? Does it actually do anything? Because the internet is divided, and I'm going to weigh in on my opinion, which doesn't mean that my opinion is correct or incorrect, but I'm going to provide an argument that hopefully provides possible understanding. I personally do feel a big difference between 1,000 hertz and 8,000 hertz, a little less with 4,000 hertz, and it's one of those that I absolutely can guess 10 out of 10 times if this works. But with that said, let's get into the actual video. 4,000 and 8,000 hertz polling rate is becoming more common on higher end gaming mice, but is it worth the price premium? Today I'm going to give 5 reasons why and why not. Some history: I've been using 4,000 hertz on my Razer Viper V2 Pro, Death Adder V3 Pro, and Basilisk V3 Pro. I'd actually show you those mice, but I'm so trapped in this little tiny box that I can't really move. And 8,000 hertz on my Viper Mini SE for months. This tends to be my main and has been my main. I do have the Final Mouse Ultralight X coming in here soon. It's supposed to actually arrive as I'm recording this video. These mice have been used on multiple devices, from a laptop with an AMD 5800H and a 3050 Ti to an Intel 13700F with 4090 at 100 and 240 hertz monitors / TVs, and also another top-end gaming laptop as well, and your basic lower end but entry-level gaming desktop computer as well, with like a 3060 and like an okay processor. So what I'm saying here is I've tested this on a multitude of different types of computers, ranging from being bottom of the line, middle of the line, to top of the line. I tend to perform in the 15 to 20 percentile in ranked games and aim lab scenarios on average, sometimes way better than that, and have achieved rank of 49 or 50 in Halo, or AKA now they've changed that to Onyx, and Halo multiple times, and Diamond in Apex Legends, where my issue has never been aim, but the lack of education about which characters, weapons, combos are best, along with fully learning map lanes and all that other educational stuff. So obviously I'm no pro gamer. I'm not saying that I'm a pro gamer, but I'm not terrible either. And the reason why I just took way too long explaining that is because I know plenty of people are going to be like, well, the pros use this and the pros use that. And I don't think pro gamers are good people to go after, because they tend to just stick to what works for them and they don't like to deviate a whole lot. Some of them do, but anyways, too long on that point. I'm getting way too distracted. This is a long video. Timestamps have got you if you're impatient, but I do think watching all the way through will be beneficial, especially if you're on the fence or not about higher polling rate mice. So, Pro 1. First, some quick math. 1,000 hertz polling is 1 millisecond. 2,000 hertz polling rate is 0.5 milliseconds. 4,000 hertz is 0.25 milliseconds, and 8,000 hertz is 0.125 milliseconds. The average visual paired with motor reaction time of a human is 240 milliseconds. But I would argue that most people that are upper end tend to be scoring in the 140 to 180 millisecond range if you're super quick reactions. There are 1,000 milliseconds in a second. We are talking about some crazy numbers here, which is why I think a lot of people think the increased polling rate for mice is completely inconsequential, as who the heck can notice that type of stuff? And I don't blame them for that outlook or that argument, as can a human truly feel 0.125 milliseconds compared to 1 milliseconds? I don't know. As a one-off, I'm not sure, and I doubt it. However, when it is repeated over and over again, such as tracking and constant mouse motion, that difference compounds to the point where I do think you can feel it. As if we do some more math, which is certainly not my strong suit, at 1,000 hertz, in 30 seconds, you get 30,000 bits of information. Whereas with 8,000 hertz, you get 240,000 bits of information. Whoa. Now that is noticeable. I find the easiest spot to notice this is on a high-end refresh rate monitor on the desktop, and you can even see it by watching the mouse move around. However, I think an even better example is if you're in game and you're swinging your gun around, you can see it. I also feel it a lot when I'm going and just clicking on things in general, or boxes or whatever, like in-game inventory, because my cursor is just immediately exactly where I need it to be, where when I'm at lower hertz, I'm just not as precise. There's a little more of if the center of my palm is where the exact center is, when I'm at 1000 hertz, I might hit a little bit more on the edges and the periphery of that. Like I'm still clicking the item, but it's not as much as in the center. Or with 8000 hertz, it's like bam, center time every single time. And a lot of my testing tended to be with the same mouse. I would go to 8000 hertz, I would press the DPI button to switch the profile back to 1000 hertz, and I would test that. And then there were times that I would mix it up, and because I sometimes have multiple mice that have, so I'll have like 2 Razer Viper V2 Pros. I'll have one set to 1000, one set to 8000. I'll mix them up so I don't know which one is which, and then I'll just play a game and be like, okay, does this feel like 1000 hertz or 8000 hertz and stuff like that. Anyways, it's an objective fact that reduced latency leads to better accuracy and performance, whether you are conscious of it or not. Personally, I find 1000 hertz to 4000 hertz to be noticeable in certain scenarios, with 4000 hertz to 8000 hertz being even less noticeable, as in the difference from 4000 to 8000, and only comes into play during very specific scenarios. But 1000 hertz compared to 8000 hertz, there is a big difference, and I think feels a lot better than just the jump from 1000 to 4000 hertz. Another way to say this is taking monitors. I have a monitor over here, which is why I'm reaching over there. Is you've got your 60 hertz, right? Which is like, okay, not great. 144 hertz, big jump. Definitely feel that. 60 hertz to 120 hertz or 60 hertz to 90 hertz, you can feel it, but it's not super noticeable. 60 hertz to 240 hertz, whoa, that you can notice. 60 hertz to 360 hertz, definitely can notice. I feel like polling rate is very much the same in that sense of 1000 to 2000, negligible. Like, if you can feel it, that's awesome. I have a really hard time with that one. I don't think I could guess that one correctly. 1000 to 4000, I'm going to be guessing a lot more often on that one because I can feel it better, but it's not going to be one of those like transformational things. 1000 to 8000, absolutely can feel that every single time with very little time in between testing. I mean, I can literally shake my mouse back and forth, switch, shake my mouse, and be like, okay, that's 1000 or 8000. And the reason why I can do this is the mouse just feels more responsive all around. It's smoother, it has less delay, I'm more accurate, and it just feels like my mouse movement and my brain are connected in one. See, this is most noticeable in my flicking, where I just, again, the palm example, and also with tracking, as I'm just tracking better. It's just right on the money, as you have reduced latency and therefore more visual stimulus to go off, which allows you to have better aim. I also find that I hit headshots way more often, again, because I'm hitting that exact middle of my palm. I also find that pixel aiming, which is when you move the cursor just a pixel to move, like, to micro correct. So going for a headshot, you are slightly off and then you need to come back. That's what I mean by pixel. That's a lot easier at higher polling rates because, again, your mouse is more responsive when you're actually moving it on the surface as it picks up more information. That was really long, and I apologize. I'm going way off the deep end for this one. Moving in to the con 1. With this increased visual data and reduced latency, exacerbates or worsens or makes more noticeable all of your mistakes. A lot of people like to play at 500 hertz polling because they report it is smoother, and by smoother, what they're really meaning is that they have poor control of their mouse, probably due to just not good hand placement, so it shakes and makes them miss shots, which disappears with 5000 hertz because it's not as accurate, and therefore it's not picking up as much information, and therefore it smooths out their jitters that they have in their hand and their aiming. With these sensors, 99.8% resolution accuracy in the Focus Pro. Focus Pro? Yes, Focus Pro. Not Focus Plus was like 99.6. I think I've read the Hero sensor is 98%. Some other people have said that it's 99%. I actually think it's 98 from my research done a long time ago. Anyways, that's not important. What I'm saying is that these polling rates, if your mouse moves, that your computer will pick that up and it will show you in game. Because with 8000 hertz, if your hand is slightly in the wrong place and you adjust it during your flick, miss. You need, or say that you need to hold your cursor in something for an extended period of time, such as tracking or something like that, but have weird positioning, fatigue, you twitch, you breathe wrong, it's going to be a miss. In translation, if you have bad form when gaming or already fatigued, that will probably be worsened at higher polling rates because you'll need to be using more energy trying to keep it controlled and may fatigue faster due to that. So you may choose to not use it at all. Moving in to Pro 2, we gamers are a competitive bunch and often willing to spend extraordinary amounts of money for any type of advantage. 4090 for 1700, so I can play on low settings at 1000 frames per second. Sign me up. 1080p monitor at 500 hertz? Yes, please. Gaming glasses that increase contrast and blocks against blue light? You betcha. Gotta have it. A $1,000 headset so I can hear a guy think about breathing from across the map? Absolutely, give it to me now. With 4000 or 8000 hertz, you'll leave most of the plebs behind that are stuck on 1000 hertz, making you take the top of the leaderboards without even trying at all. Okay, so obviously I'm being a little verbose and over dramatic. If I'm being honest, I pretty much ran out of pros after the first point, so now I'm just reaching for anything I can grab onto, and no dice. So we'll move on to the rest of the negatives. Con 2. As for the second con, battery life is a problem, especially at 8000 hertz. Essentially, 4000 hertz will cut your battery by 65%, and 8000 hertz will cut it by 80%. At 4000 hertz, I found recharging to not be a huge problem, as battery life for the V2 Pro and the Death Adder V3 Pro are 80 and 90 hours at 1000 hertz with constant motion. With constant motion at 4000 hertz, that leads to 24 hours. I think they're overshooting a bit there, but regardless, that is 3 full 8-hour days of nonstop motion, which to me is doable, making it where if you aren't gaming and are leaving your mouse still, often you may get an additional day out of it. With the Viper Mini being 60 hours total and 12 hours, yes, I just said 12 hours at 8000 hertz, you're charging every day and a half, or if you have a long gaming session, literally once every time you game, which I tend to be very accurate, as I feel like I charge my Viper Mini SE all the time. And I'm someone who isn't super sensitive to that type of thing, to the point that I will purposely use another mouse or switch it to 1000 hertz, which is why I have the profile switcher, so I don't have to use more battery when I'm doing normal tasks, where I won't find any benefits of that forever or at all. Like desktop things, you're not going to notice a huge difference between 1000 and 8000 hertz, if any at all. But with the SE's quick charging, I tend to not even really notice, because I put it on the plug on the charger for 30 minutes and I'm good to go. Or I watch a couple YouTube videos and it's all charged back up. So I think that does depend on which mouse you're using and how fast it charges. But as much as I like to joke around about the second Pro, it does fit me almost to a T, as I'm absolutely somebody that likes to try to min-max literally everything in their life, and it tends to be somebody that likes to pay money for that as well, so I am biased towards that a little bit, because obviously I want to find justification for me spending a lot of money. Moving on to con number 3, higher polling rate uses more CPU. You can easily see this by going to your desktop, pulling up Task Manager, going to Performance, then CPU, and right-clicking to show logical cores. And then just move your mouse as fast as you possibly can. And bam, you can see a huge spike of your CPU, even on the 13700F or 5900X. In game, I don't notice an actual impact, which isn't to say that it isn't there, just that I don't notice it. But theoretically, if you're maxing out a certain core that game is also using, you're going to have lower frames. And if you already have a lower end CPU that is already struggling to maintain acceptable frames and hitting 80 or higher % in games, and you add a high polling rate mouse, you may be tipping over the edge with a reduction in frames compared to 1000 hertz. There was also a recent Windows update that was supposed to, I think only on Windows 11, I don't know about Windows 10, but it was supposed to fix all of the jitters of when you're moving your mouse, that it would tank frames in games. I haven't actually noticed this. From that update was like probably 6 months ago. I've had no drops of frames or reduction in frames on any of the computers that I've tested the higher polling rates on. All of them are running Windows 11, and I haven't seen any drop in frames. Supposedly, based off of Reddit, people are still getting dropped frames. I don't know if that's because they actually are, or if that was a thing that was happening, because I did run into that pretty regularly before that Windows update. And allegedly, there's also some games that don't technically fully support higher polling rate mice, and therefore it doesn't matter, I guess. Supposedly, that one I don't know if I fully understand, but anyways, going back to the frames thing, to me, barely acceptable frames is varying between 40 and 60 FPS on average. Ideally, I want a solid 60 FPS for single-player games and greater than 100 FPS for multiplayer games on average, and anything above that is definitely going to feel better. I've also seen frame drops at higher polling, but I've never seen it at 1000 or 2000 hertz, but have seen it at 4000 and 8000 hertz, but again, that was with that old Windows before that Windows update. And even then, I thought that that was more of that it wasn't related to the CPU, but more of a software issue. As for example, one of the things that I was running into is when I was playing Escape from Tarkov at 4,000 hertz without Discord open, my frames would be peachy. Stable as could be, or at least as stable as you can get in that game. But once I opened Discord, my frames would literally just tank and become completely unplayable. If I switch that to 2000 hertz or close Discord, the issue was completely fixed. So again, I think that was more of a software firmware issue behind the scenes more so than my CPU, because like I said, if it wasn't in that specific scenario, it worked fine, which means it's not the CPU having an issue. Also, I've seen people have problems with certain games where I have no issues and vice versa. I had issues and other people did not, which means, again, I think that was a software issue that was fixed with that Windows update. I'm talking way too long about this. Let's move on to the next point. Oh, the Windows update, I actually have it in my script here. That's fantastic. Windows 11 update version 22H2, which essentially improves computers' performance when using high report games for gaming. I have a link and some text in the description that goes more in depth about that in case you're curious. Moving on to the fourth con is that it takes a high DPI to fully saturate and get the full benefits of it. They recommend a minimum of 1600 DPI and ideally 3200 DPI or higher, especially for 8000 hertz. If you're using 400 or 800 DPI, which is the most common DPI, by the way, for gamers, getting enough movement to saturate it fully is nearly impossible. So you'll be leaving performance on the table, and it may feel like 1000 hertz because essentially it is 1000 hertz, which is another reason why I think a lot of people may not be feeling a difference, is they're not actually doing the testing correctly and therefore are getting the wrong results, as they aren't saturating those lines enough to get it fully to activate. An example, if I'm driving a supercar that maxes out at 200 miles per hour, but all I do is drive in the city streets at 30 to 40 miles per hour, I'm never taking full advantage of that car, and may even say the difference between it and the 1998 Honda Civic that's missing its bumper is essentially the same, because it feels the same when I'm driving around on the road. In fact, the Honda Civic might even feel better because its shocks might be a little more, better it's not as responsive, and therefore it feels more comfortable to drive. So therefore, that supercar, get it out of here, because it's a waste of money. But if I go on a racetrack and I'm cornering, braking, accelerating, the difference between the two cars will be night and day different. But with that increased polling rate, navigating on Windows in menus of games, and depending on the game, since there are so many of them, come stock with insanely fast look sensitivity. I went back to DPI here, by the way. So, and in games, the DPI tends to be like the look sensitivity in the game. So if you're at 1600 DPI, and then you go into a game and you don't lower the look sensitivity, it's already stupid high. This is improved recently with modern games, but back in the day, man, it was hard to get the DPI slider down enough to be manageable in game. So moving back to the script, since so many of them come at stock with insanely fast look sensitivity and you can only adjust it so far, it becomes unwieldy, which is again one reason why people tend to like 400 or 800 DPI, as when you're, for example, Escape from Tarkov, when I'm trying to drag something off of a dead scav and I pull it into my inventory, if I'm at 16 or 3200 DPI, that thing's like, whoosh, it's like super fast. But if I'm at 800, 400 DPI, it's like, so it's good. So again, some people with the higher polling rate, it takes some getting used to. The higher you have for, like, if you have a 4K screen or a 2K screen, it tends to do better at higher polling rates because you have more pixels, which makes the look sensitivity feel a lot better than if you're on like a 720p monitor. Having 1600 DPI is going to be like, I barely moved my mouse and I went from the top right all the way to like the fifth screen way over there. So anyways, fifth con. Mostly just so I could hit a fifth point, like I said at the beginning of the video, and I would in the intro. Depending on the gear and or skill level, it may not matter. A PC stacks latency. If you have a low-end system with a crappy low-hertz screen that has insane response time, it will likely negate the effect of any higher polling rate. Or maybe it will help you. I don't know. Also, if you can't hit the broadside of a barn anyways in a game, well, higher polling rate won't make you all of a sudden be Hawkeye. Right? Like, got to get the fundamentals down first. Additionally, if you aren't playing fast-paced shooters or games that require high levels of sensitivity and accuracy, then you'll be wasting a lot of the potential. As again, 8,000 hertz or 4,000 hertz isn't something that's just like across the board, like, oh my gosh, everything is better. It's more of a situational thing of when I'm aiming and doing something like this, you're going to see an improvement at that point. I still think it will help, but at that point, I think the cons would outweigh the pros and therefore would not be worth investing in. So while I think even casual gamers will notice a benefit, especially if they test it in the correct scenarios, I think you will get into a lot of diminishing returns quickly, which may make it so you want to leave it at 1000 hertz instead, to hide your flaws with your aim, get better battery life, put less stress on your system, and more easily saturate those lines, and so on and so forth that I've gone through way too many times. Questions, concerns, arguments, whatever else, I would love to hear them in the comment section below, as it's got you. As genuinely, I would like to hear your opinion. Have you tried 4000 hertz? Have you tried 8000 hertz? Do you notice a difference? Do you not notice a difference? Do you think I'm a crackpot who's doing the crack way too much? Let me know. Like if you like this video, dislike if you hated it, and subscribe if you want to see more like this. Otherwise, I will see you and your beautiful face on the next one. God bless, and peace out.